Hi gang, Rob here. It is the evening of 30 April 2018. It's kind of like deja vu, isn't it? I already have 3 videos on this knife. Or do I? Do I really? I don't think I do. This is the Spyderco Advocate. Model number C214TP, I believe. And I'll get into this later, but it's kind of sad it still retains its same model number, at least for 1 or 2 dealers who still have the first version of this knife in stock. But this is not the original Advocate. This is what I'm calling the Gen 2 Spyderco Advocate. It is a matter of public record, at least on this channel, of why I loved and at the same time hated the original Spyderco Advocate, but we'll kind of run through that. And we're also going to run through what's different about the Gen 2 knife and why it now realizes its full potential. Maybe with one tiny caveat, but I don't think it's an issue. So here's the story. Okay, the first Spyderco Advocate came out, I believe, just before Christmas 2016, something like that. About a year and a half ago. It was the 4th Spyderco knife designed by blade sport champion and custom knife maker Gail Bradley from Weatherford, Texas. The Advocate, based on a Gail Bradley custom. And it's just a beautiful package. A very distinctly Gail Bradley blade. CPM M4 blade steel. Very high flat grind. You could almost call it full flat. About 22 thousandths thick behind the edge. A gorgeous Taichung Taiwan satin finish. An unbelievably beautiful and functional, slightly crowned or 3D machined set of titanium scales with a gorgeous orange peel finish. Hides wear, hides fingerprints. It's gorgeous, gives you a little texture, a little grip actually. Beautifully finished edges. Just check out the polish on the spine of this handle. Chamfers are super clean. The polish is beautiful. Just everything on this knife is done with the ultimate in Taichung Spyderco precision. The ergos are unbelievable. The saber grip is awesome. You can even walk forward into this sort of half choil in front of the flipper tab. You're completely safe there. Very interesting design. Overhand pinch grip is money. The middle finger doesn't really move forward into the choil and doesn't get hung up on this point. It just nestles right where it needs to. Super comfortable. Hammer grip is very good for such a slim knife, not even 3/8 of an inch thick, I don't think. And then the reverse grip, absolute money. I mean, yeah. Oh, the draw cut grips. There's sort of the vertical draw, there's the horizontal draw. Every grip is good, which is, that's saying something on a knife this thin. It's beautiful. It seemed to be well built. Its finish quality is exemplary. There's your lockup. Lock bar tension is pure Gail Bradley. Look how thick the stock remains in the scallops for the lock bar relief. That means lock bar tension is high. It was high on the first one, it's high on the second one. So where did the problems come from? Well, I'm going to just sort of encapsulate this for you. Taichung Taiwan ball bearing flippers from Spyderco, and there have been several. The Domino, the Dice, the Southern, the Mantra. They're all sort of plagued by the same problem. Very small diameter ball bearings, hardened backing washers made from extremely thin stock, 5.5 thousandths to be specific on this one. The ball bearings kind of deform and dig into and start to dish the backing washers, which is exacerbated in this model because the lock bar tension is so high, especially when the knife is closed and the lock bar is extended outward the full amount. And then the detent ball being quite away from the pivot, I mean half an inch or better. That means a long lever and a lot of lock bar tension, forcing those ball bearings into that backing washer. So the flipping action, especially the smoothness of the closing action on the first generation Advocates, was bad out of box, and it got worse the more you used it. This prompted several negative review videos, a couple of which were mine, and an immediate halt in production by Spyderco, and a year or so without these knives in production. And then I think maybe late February, maybe early March of this year, Gen 2 Advocates hit retailers' shelves. And I gotta say, they made this knife the second time the way it should have been made the first time. I loved my Advocate, but alas, I sold it because I knew every time I opened and closed it, I was destroying those washers. And you know, for a knife it's a Gale Bradley, it should be a knife that you can just absolutely go to town on a chunk of wood with. The design, the blade steel, the geometry, they make it a working cutter. And to have a component that was just eating itself up, it just made the knife horrible to own. In fact, I was so emotionally wrecked. I was so emotionally wrecked by my Advocate experience that I just sort of cleaned house on my Spyderco collection. You guys might remember one of my Thursday night knife sales. I sold, I don't know what, like 6 or 7 of my Spydercos. I was just mad. I was mad at Sal. I was mad at Eric. I was mad at Gail. Just mad. So I'm really happy to have this one. This is a Gen 2. I just got it Saturday. Today's Monday. I'm going to do a little footage for you now of the knife disassembled, not boring you with the disassembly and reassembly. It's a blade, some slabs, a pivot, and some screws. You get the idea. If you want to watch a detailed disassembly video of the knife, you can look at one of my first 3 videos on the original Advocate, where I think Nick Shabazz has a new Gen 2 Advocate disassembly video. There's nothing special. So I'm going to take a look with you at the knife disassembled and go over the components in detail, and then we'll sort of meet back together and I'll give you my impressions on how the knife works. Here you go. So here are all the components of the Gen 2 Advocate laid out on my background. And as you can see, there are some differences between the new Gen 2 Advocate and the original. I don't believe we changed anything in the handle. Both bearing channels are 25 thousandths deep and still the same 417 thousandths diameter, so nothing new here. However, big changes in the backing washers, the ball bearings, and the blade, believe it or not. Because the Advocate is such a slim design, and M4 is very, very hard to machine or grind or do anything to change the appearance of after hardening, Spyderco opted to relieve the handle slabs only for bearing clearance in the first model. They also then opted for extremely tiny 40 thousandths diameter ball bearings, and as we're well aware, paper thin, almost tin foil backing washers that were 5.5 thousandths thick. Well, they've bitten the bullet here. The big change that needed to happen to make that hardware more robust was this. Yeah. We have a bearing recess. It looks to be ground, at least probably machined with an end mill prior to heat treat, and then ground for finishing after heat treat. In the blade, that's probably as deep as the one, maybe even deeper than the one in the handle slabs. I did not measure it. Let's do that now. What the heck? Why not? Let's see. .42 thousandths deep. So 42 thousandths deep channel in the blade tang, 25 in the handle slab. Then you have the big change in the ball bearing, a couple. First of all, you can tell right now by looking at it, much larger 1/16 inch diameter ball bearings in a cage made of a solid hunk of phosphor bronze. So those bearings are like snapped in there somehow. Not quite sure how that process works. If you know, let us know. Really a great design. It's not an open cage of a formed thin material that allows all kinds of debris to get in between the bearings. Much like the urethane cage in the original, this one really seals them off nicely. Probably gives a lot more rigidity than the urethane did. Pretty cool idea. And then let's look at the backing washer. You'll remember the originals were 5.5 thousandths thick. The new ones, see if I can set one on end for you. There you go. 16.5 thousandths, 0.0165 thick. And I took a still of this offside backing washer, and I don't know if the video is going to give you a clear picture of this. I do have one slight area of concern, which is that this has been flipped. There we go. If you look closely, if I get the light to reflect just right, there are a couple peen marks, very slight though they may be, and we've discussed this ad nauseum in previous Advocate videos. The peening really happens from when the knife is at rest, closed, just from lock bar tension, pushing the ball bearings into the washer. So we know that the steel in the hardened washer is a little softer than the steel in the ball bearing. So even hardened washers are going to do that with the kind of lock bar tension that the Advocate has. I hope as the channel burnishes that stops, and I think it seems to be doing that. I've probably flipped this Gen 2 Advocate about, I don't know, 150 times since Saturday when I picked it up. It seems to be doing okay. Here's another neat thing about these washers. They seem to be very stable and flat. So were something to happen, some kind of damaging forces in that bearing track, you can flip these things. I detect no burr on these. They seem to be tumbled. Even if there were a slight burr, you could just knock that off with sandpaper on glass or a ultrafine stone. So it seems like they got it dialed in, guys. It really does. Very, very big improvement on the internals. Okay, I'm going to put this back together and not bore you with it. Worth noting, however, is this. This is one of the body screws. I don't know what you see, but I saw 0 thread locker. Let me get like a super macro here. I've gone to manual focus, listening to your complaints about my focusing ability. There's no Loctite on that body screw. There certainly was on the pivot screw, but not red Loctite, something like a blue. Bravo, Spyderco, thank you for listening. I'm going to put it back together now, and we'll bring you back for some conclusions, some final thoughts. Be right back, guys. Okay, we're back. So now, what do I really think about this whole package altogether? Well, I really love it. Just to touch on the flipping action, look at the position of the flipper tab. just barely behind the axis of the pivot, which means it's a beautiful push button flipper. But it's very vertical, very perpendicular to the frame, which gives you a great angle for light switch flipping. Can I make the knife fail? Yes, I can. There again, lots of lock bar tension. As that knife is rotating around in its arc, there is a lot of resistance. It's not a drop shut knife. It's a wiggle shut knife. It's a, whoops, hard to do in the camera. It's a fling shut knife. It's never going to fall on your thumb. And it's very smooth. I mean, there is no perceptible grittiness. It's very hydraulic, which is kind of rare for a ball bearing knife, period. Especially rare for an advocate. Middle finger flicks very well. I will say this. If you're a lefty and middle finger flicks well, you want to use the flesh of your finger, not your fingernail. It works better that way. I don't know, for a right-hander, I believe it thumb flicks. It does. A little harder to sweep open if you're a right-hander because you're fighting the lock bar, but it'll work. Just the detent's a little tough to break, at least on this particular version. I don't care because I'm not right-handed. Don't know if that works right-handed because I never do it. But the flipping action, stellar, and the closing is super smooth. And it is getting smoother the more that I use it. I mean, there's no notchiness at all. And still a lot of effort. So that it's still very Gale Bradley, but it doesn't feel like it's eating itself up. I just got nothing to complain about here, guys. It's actually kind of a fun knife to have in the hand. And, you know, that's not a normal Gale Bradley quality, is it? You know, Gale's philosophy is not making knives that are great fidget toys. His philosophy is all about making knives that are durable, heavy-duty cutters. Here you got both, which is not a bad thing. Definitely a keeper. I am so glad they did this. I'm glad they just didn't write off the model and act like nothing ever happened. I got to wipe it here. One thing I do want to talk about, and this is only applicable probably as of now. If you're looking at this video a couple of years after it's posted, this is going to mean nothing to you. But the model number on the CQI Pivot Advocate, the Gen 2 Advocate, did not change. There are still some retailers who are in possession of new in the box Gen 1 Advocates. And it looks to me like new map pricing came out in conjunction with the release of the Gen 2. The copy description is different on retailers who have these. It indicates clearly the CQI Constant Quality Improvement Pivot System has been installed in the knife. But the price went up. The originals were $233.97. The new ones are $246.97. But I do know one retailer specifically who has nothing in stock but Gen 1s with the old description in his ad text on his website. But he is affected by the new map pricing. So he's got first gen Advocates at $246.97. And frankly, Spyderco, I hope you're listening, if you have dealers who are hung with those old ones, nobody wants them. Let them discount them. Please. I mean, give your dealers some love, guys. And I don't know that there are that many of those in the system, but whoever has them, and you guys, you buyers, customers, knife nuts, just read clearly the description. If you're on a website looking at Advocates, make sure the copy CQI Pivot is in the description so you know you're getting a new one. I mean, if it's really bothering you, you can absolutely call that web retailer and make sure that's what they're selling you. If they're good at their job, they know. But I just kind of wanted to post this review of what is now an extremely awesome Spyderco. It was so sad, the first one, because it was this close to being extremely awesome Spyderco with one fatal flaw. And now fatal flaw solved. Advocate awesome. That's all for this one, my friends. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the Word and my advocate are sharp.